Yale, Lena. 2 months had passed since the night of the massacre, but the horrors of that attack still haunted the dreams of many. We lost 34 people that night, and another 7 later on, due to fatal injuries. What hurt the most was I knew Dad left the safety of the walls for me, to protect me and to make sure I was safe. And with his death, I lost Mom too. True mates who have marked one another will die together. A lot has changed since then. People look at me with contempt and hatred. I knew they blamed me for the loss of their beta couple. But I blamed myself too. It was my fault. The cheek that she's showing her face here, one of the 2 women who walked past us muttered. I smiled sadly, not bothering to look back at them. I don't think they realized that they may have lost their beta couple. But I lost my parents. The familiar painful hold on my chest returned and I swallowed hard, trying to focus on the destination we were heading towards. Charlene turned, glaring at the back of the 2 women. Ignore them, she said, wrapping her arm around mine. I do, my beautiful queen. I smiled at her among everyone. She was the one who didn't change towards me. Sure, the Alpha and Luna were okay with me, but I didn't see them too often. And I did feel a hint of hostility from the Alpha. I still remember when he asked what I was doing out there. How my carelessness had cost us all. Come on, we better hurry before Theon realizes we are no longer in the baths. She giggled. Theon. That was someone else who treated me indifferently, the same as ever. The most emotion I saw on him was when he told me their fate. You know, he's going to get angry again. I smirked, brushing away the thoughts that flooded my mind. Oh well. You are one of the strongest people I know. In the last 2 months you have taken that to an entirely new level. He'll know, I am safe, she stated confidently. She was exaggerating. I was skilled, but I was by far one of the strongest. Charlene. What would I do without her? But it didn't take long for someone to turn on me. Would I lose her too? Since my parents' death, I had focused on working harder and pushing myself to my limits. I was 17, but I still hadn't gotten my wolf. Werewolves usually shifted at any age from 13. The latest recorded shift was at 19, but the average age was 14 to 16 for most wolves. Charlene had shifted at 15, and I was now 17, nearly 18, with no sign of a shift happening. I know it was something that everyone talked about. I was the daughter of the beta couple. I should have shifted by now. In the kingdom of a stallion, there were 10 packs, with the center and the largest territory belonging to King Andres, father of Charlene and the alpha of the Silver Storm pack. I knew the expectation of shifting and proving my worth to take the beta position had only grown since my parents had passed away. But there was nothing that I could do to force it to happen. I just had to bide my time and wait for the shift. We walked through the bustling streets and past the lines of trees heading towards the coast. The sun was already low in the sky, and we would only have an hour at most. Finally, some space to breathe, Charlene whispered as we headed down the rocky path. I didn't blame her. Things had been rather tense as of late, and I knew there was something troubling her. If she wanted to share, she knew I was there for her when she was ready to tell me. We reached our destination, and she smiled, slipping off her shoes and beginning to take her dress off. It was safe down this side. Well, as long as we were gone by nightfall. That's when the waters became a threat. The coast this close to Westerfell was for the most part not too bad, but the sea was the kingdom of a dark species. And it was common knowledge not to linger anywhere close to the waters at night. I unzipped my boots, unbuttoned my leather pants and stripped them off, leaving the white shirt that I had tucked into my pants on. It only partially covered my derriere, which was clad in tiny underwear. I was 5'7" in comparison to Charlene's 5'10". For werewolves, I was slightly on the shorter side, And unlike Charlene, who had a slender-toned body, I had slightly curvier hips and an ass that had a little more fat than the average she-wolf, with double D breasts that made me appear more like an omega at times. I was a little more conscious of stripping bare, even though we were alone. Charlene was only in her lingerie and was already splashing around in the water. I walked into the water, allowing the soothing tides to wash over me. I loved the sea, the feel of the waves rippling against me, the calmness of the fresh air, and the smell of the clean, salty water. It was more relaxing than anything else. Yelena. My eyes flew open just as Charlene grabbed my ankle, dragging me into the water and making me gasp as I stumbled, tumbling backwards into the water. I gasped again as I broke the surface, brushing back my wet hair and giving her a mocking glare. Charl, oh, you asked for it. We splashed each other, shrieking and giggling when we managed to shove the other under the water. I think for a while I was able to forget all my troubles, when the red glow of the sun bathed us in its warm colors. I looked at Charlene. I think we better head back now. I'm sure Theon found out we're missing, I suggested reluctantly, not wanting to leave the warmth of the water. Not that I'd mind him showing up. He's so stiff and indifferent. I wonder if seeing us almost naked would even bother him. She mused, swimming away. I doubt it. Nothing bothers him, Charlene. 5 minutes, one swim and I'll be back. She called out, swimming away. I sighed, staring out at the glittering water, and taking a deep breath. I ducked under the water, looking at the fish that were swimming around. I held my breath for several moments, enjoying the beauty beneath the surface, before my body begged for oxygen and I broke the surface, taking in a deep gulp of air as I brushed my hair off my face. Get out! My heart skipped a beat, and I turned, staring up at the man that stood at the edge of the water. His coppery brown hair brushed back, his amber eyes burning with a fury that was barely contained, and his chiseled jaw set taut as he clenched his teeth. His bulging arms were crossed over his broad chest. The tattoos that peeked out from the collar and sleeves of his clothes only added to how hot he looked right now, the sun making his hair look like it was on fire, emphasizing every angle and curve of his face. Excuse me. I raised an eyebrow, very aware that if I got out now my shirt would be sticking to me and reveal my lilac lacy lingerie. You left, without telling me, obviously, or you wouldn't have allowed us to leave. I am surprised it took you this long to come here. Get out now. You're not my guard. Charlene's gone for a swim. Go find her instead, I suggested, sinking lower into the water, leaving only my eyes above water. You know the waters are dangerous once night falls, Yelena. We need to head back. His deep, sexy voice only made my core clench. Do not make me get you out. That wouldn't be a bad idea, I sighed, and swam to the edge in defeat. Getting out of the water, I glared at the taller man, wishing I was wearing my boots. At least I would have had a few extra inches on me. Standing at 6'5", he towered over me. I never knew you were so scared of sirens, I smirked tauntingly. I'm not. I just don't think you'll be of much use with a few missing limbs, he remarked, his gaze dipping down to my soaking body. I kept my eyes on his, trying to gauge his reaction. His eyes seemed to burn through the flimsy fabrics that covered me, and I felt very bare. My white shirt was now see-through, clinging to my curves, and the lace of my bra was clearly visible, my nipples stiff from the water that had cooled considerably. That, or due to the man that stood before me, not one movement, not one hint of desire. His gaze ended at my thighs, and then I got the tiniest reaction. His tongue slid over his bottom lip, his eyes glimmering with a hue of gold before he turned his back on me smoothly. Get dressed and get Charlene. The alpha wants to see the both of us. Yelena. Surprisingly, Theon said nothing to Charlene when she returned, not even casting her a glance as we made our way back towards the castle. We split up, with Theon escorting Charlene to her room whilst I headed to my own quarters, the beta quarters, a place that was so empty since Mom and Dad were gone. I quickly showered before pulling on a navy-fitted top, black pants and boots. Before I pulled my wet hair back into a ponytail, I exited my room and almost knocked into Theon, who was leaning against the wall. "Goddess," I gasped, jumping back, my heart thumping. "You scared me." For someone so audacious, I didn't know anything could scare you. He replied emotionlessly, "What's life if you don't live it at full throttle?" I replied, making sure the door was locked before we both fell in step. "Let me guess, not living, simply existing." He raised his eyebrow. "Are you mocking me? I'm glad you figured it out," he whispered huskily, leaning down. My heart skipped a beat as our eyes met, making me feel giddy. His sexy masculine scent invaded my senses, the thrum of his steady heartbeat making my own pound louder. "Jerk!" I managed to retort, pushing him away. Theon had only been in this pack for 2 years. We didn't know where he had come from or who he was. The only thing he remembered when he regained consciousness was his name, Theon. It had actually been Charlene and me who had found him, a few weeks after her shift. We had been out, sneaking away as usual, when we saw a naga, a half-human, half-serpent-like being. Unlike the ones who lived on land, the sea naga were as dangerous as the sirens. And this one had been no different. Seeing the bloody body in the naga's hold, Charlene had frozen in horror, and although my instincts told me to run, I couldn't leave someone to die. And so I had swum out. With nothing but my sword, I had managed to injure the naga just enough to free Theon from his hold. Despite him having elemental powers, I had managed to pull Theon to safety, and we had then called for help. But Theon didn't know that. Charlene had asked if she could say she saved him when she saw how handsome the young man was. As much as I would have loved to taunt him, this was even better. Now I often reminded him that he had been saved by a princess. We weren't sure about Theon's age, but he looked to be in his early 20s. It had taken time for everyone to trust him, but slowly he became one of us and was initiated into the pack. He never regained his memory, but he was hard-working, strong, and an excellent warrior, so he had risen through the ranks. He was now an Epsilon rank warrior, which meant there were only 4 ranks above him, and that included the Alpha rank. Being the princess's bodyguard was an honorable job. It meant that the Alpha trusted him and knew he was capable of protecting her. We walked down the hall. I turned towards the Alpha King's office, only for Theon to take a left. "The office is this way." "I know, but did I say he was in his office?" He replied, as if this was obvious. "Right. Alpha Andres, no matter how many times you go before him, he was still intimidating and powerful. He was the biggest man I had seen at around 6 feet 7 or 8 inches. He just looked far too large around everyone else. There was a handful of men around Theon's size, but they were rare too. The king was a beast and a king in all aspects." Theon walked out of the double doors that led to the back grounds, and I grabbed the door before it swung shut in my face. "Ever heard of manners? That's no way to treat a lady," I remarked. "Never knew you were one." His emotionless reply came as he glanced at me over his shoulder. His gaze flicked to my body for a moment before a small smirk crossed his face. "Yeah, definitely not a woman. I'll get you back for that." I glared at his back, my gaze falling to his ass. I couldn't deny he was sexy, yet he was equally irritating. Although both Charlene and I found him incredibly handsome, he didn't give us any attention. Although lately, I felt he teased me a little more. Or maybe that was me being wishful. I followed him out, just as the king slammed 2 men to the ground, making the ground shake at the impact. His torso was shirtless, a man made from pure bulging muscles. His tan skin was littered with scars and tattoos of runes. Symbols and images depicting war and victory mapped his entire torso, and his straggly chocolate brown hair fell below his huge muscular shoulders. He was the opposite of his daughter, who had gone after her mother. Just on time. Who's next? He asked with a grin as he turned to us, his gold tooth glinting under the lights of the courtyard. I wouldn't mind sparring with you, Alpha, but I fear I may not make it out alive. I replied with a small smile. It felt good to know he was still talking to me, even if it was just the adrenaline of beating us to a pulp that put him in a good mood. I hear you have been training a lot more. Let's see. That was a command. One I couldn't disobey. Don't die, Theon remarked mockingly, crossing his arms and placing one hand under his chin, as if he was about to enjoy the show. I stepped out and looked up at my Alpha, amusement clear in his eyes. He knew I wouldn't even last a few minutes. The two men who had been thrown to the ground got up as the king jerked his head in dismissal. I am not sure if you are reckless or brave, the king stated, grabbing a towel and wiping his face, which was coated with a layer of sweat. A little of both, I suggested, when he turned back to me. A predatorial grin crossed his face, and he raised his fist, lunging at me without warning. My eyes flew open, and I ducked to the left, just as his fist hit the ground, creating a crack. He turned and threw another punch, using all his brute strength. Of course, I wouldn't last when it came to a battle of strength. Was it disrespectful to defend or attack the king? I kept dodging when the king growled, "Do not run. Attack. I am sure Will showed you something." The sudden anger and irritation in his voice at the loss of his closest confidant was raw and clear, sending a stab of pain through me. Of course he had. I would never let my father's name be tarnished. I knew that he blamed me too. I could see it in his eyes even if he never voiced it. But didn't they realize it hurt me too? A flash of anger overcame me, but I didn't let it show. The urge to release this pent-up irritation was rising within me. If the king had strength, then I had speed. This time when he lunged at me, fist raised, I didn't duck, blocking it with my arms and gritting my teeth as I felt something break. I twisted, grabbing the king's thick forearms, and with all the force I could muster, I kicked him straight in the stomach. I do hope he realized I could have kneed him where the sun didn't shine. But I don't think it would have been very respectful. He staggered slightly, and I glanced at Theon, a flash of surprise crossing his usually arrogant, emotionless face. Hunk. Talent but no strength. The king grunted, turning away, a clear signal that we were done. My arms screamed in agony, but they would heal. I looked down, noticing my right one was at a slight angle, but I was not going to snap it into place in front of the king. I didn't reply, bowing my head in submission. I knew what he meant, the fact that I hadn't shifted or come into full strength. He picked up a bottle of water, downing it in a few gulps, leaning against one of the pillars as he looked at both Theon and me. I could feel Theon's gaze burning into me. But I refused to look at him. "Do you know why we are constantly attacked?" he asked. Everyone wants a slice of the power that the Alpha King holds, and possibly the legend that the one who conquers a stallion ultimately has within their hold the power to rule the 13 kingdoms and the 7 seas. Theon replied, "That old folks' tale." I know people believed it, but I didn't think Theon was one for old wives' tales. The king nodded with a smirk. "Well, that's a whole load of bullshit, but every myth and legend comes from somewhere." His smirk vanished, and he looked up at the sky. "I trust you both. Theon, we may have only had you here for 2 years, but you have proven yourself as a loyal warrior and an honored member of this pack. I have placed my greatest treasure in your care, and I know you will protect her with everything. You will honor the oath you took when you joined us." I glanced at Theon, who was simply watching the king indifferently. Both men were regal and powerful. I felt like an unnecessary extra here. Why did he want to speak to me? "She saved my life. That isn't a debt that I'll ever forget," he replied. The king nodded. "Yelena, You are the daughter of my closest friend and confidant, and you are also Charlene's best friend. I know you mean the world to her, and despite everything, you do protect her. There is something I need to share with you both. His gaze scanned the area, making sure we were alone. Why did it feel like whatever he wanted to tell us was very important? The myth you speak of Theon, the so-called treasure given to the Middle Kingdom, the heart of Chaldea, of our world. It's not a tome or a magical crystal. It's something entirely different. And the reason no one has ever found it, it's said to be revealed every few centuries. I frowned as I began to piece the puzzle together. He mentioned Charlene. Was she somehow connected? You mean? Theon murmured, but I could tell from his tone that understanding had dawned on him. Yes, my daughter is the heart, the treasure that every kingdom seeks. Theon's eyes flashed, a brilliant gold. But it was only for a split second as he frowned. That makes sense. A treasure to reveal itself every 5th century. Because it is reborn. Theon mused, realization flooding his face. Yes, in an alpha female. However, the thing is, Charlene has not shown any signs of unlocking this power. Trouble is rising from all sides. We cannot delay. Well, I knew how that felt. Having something expected of you, and yet unable to do anything about it. What if she isn't the one to have this ability? You said yourself, once every few centuries, maybe it's not Charlene. I reasoned, trying not to clutch my broken arm. She is the heart of Chaldea. Before her birth, a prophecy was revealed. My daughter is the one holding the heart of our world. The powers that everyone on the planet seeks, and I want you, Theon, to train her, to push her to her limits until she unlocks those powers by luck or by force. His cold gray eyes met Theon's amber ones. An agreement was made without even a word spoken. The king dismissed us soon after, and as we walked down the hallway in silence, I didn't know what to make of it. Something big was worrying the king for him to actually think of pushing Charlene to her limits. I knew he chose Theon because everyone knew he followed rules without thinking of the consequences. Do you think you can do that to her? I asked, knowing exactly what pushing her to her limits meant. I was doing the same to myself. Sometimes I wasn't even able to move after training, and even fell unconscious at times. Why not? She saved your life. And you want to break her. His smoldering eyes met mine, and he turned, making my heart thunder under the intensity. If it's for her benefit, then yes, I'll break her willingly. A small smirk crossed his lips as he tilted his head. What's wrong, little storm jealous? Oh, please. Jealous of what? Being beaten to a pulp by you. I growled, when suddenly he grabbed my arm and snapped it back into place, making me whimper at the jarring pain that shot through my arm and neck, making my eyes water. He leaned closer, the heat of his body invading my personal space, his chest grazing against mine. I felt his warm breath on my ear as he whispered the words that sent a rush of pleasure through me. To be broken by me. Yelena. Last night's events were fresh on my mind, along with Alpha Andres's and Theon's parting words. I hadn't even been able to thank him for helping fix my arm. Something that I could have done myself, but it's a lot easier when you're not the one snapping your bones back into place. I hadn't shifted yet, so I didn't heal as fast as those who had. I had woken up with Theon's words playing on my mind and an ache between my legs that begged for only one man's touch. As much as I was sure I could find a man to satiate the hunger. I didn't want just anyone. I had changed and come out to one of the smaller, less frequently used training fields. No one really came this far out often, and since the pack had in a way shunned me, I felt more comfortable training out here alone. Rain had fallen heavily all through the night, and it was still ongoing. The ground beneath my feet was muddy, and my boots were completely covered in it. Squelching with every move I made as I punched the tree repeatedly, venting my frustration, I was wearing a tank top with a leather jacket and pants. My hair was open, and I was completely drenched, despite the overhead branches that partially shielded me from the rain. I didn't mind it. I was simply relieved that there was not a soul in sight. I guess the regulars were all training in the indoor courts and halls. I punched the tree again, the alpha's words ringing in my head. Talent, but no strength. The tone of his voice made it obvious. I was just a failure. I punched the tree harder, staring at the blood that streaked the trunk. Despite the bandages I had wrapped around my hands, I had still bruised them. The once white wrap was covered with dirt, water, and blood. Useless. A failure. I was ashamed to the Delacour name. I was meant to be my father's legacy. Someone who he'd be proud to call his daughter the future Beta, but without my wolf. I don't think that title was going to be mine. It had been 2 months, and I knew the rest of the ranked wolves wanted the king to pick a new Beta. No doubt the Gamma and Delta wolves had their eyes on that position. A position that was rightfully the Delacour's. I felt an all too familiar stinging in my eyes as I continued to hit the tree. My grunts, whimpers of pain and effort faded into the sound of the downpour. Weather that truly fitted my mood. I kept going, no longer focusing on anything but the pain in my entire body. I knew I was going to end up in bed for an entire day after this. I stumbled. My feet skidding in the mud, I fell forward, bracing my hands on the tree as my knees hit the ground. Now I think that's the best position for you to be in. A haughty voice from behind came. Irritation flashed through me as I got to my feet, turning to look at the 2 young men who stood there. Nikolai and Kyson, warriors that were of the same rank as Theon, but unlike him, both were trash in my eyes. It had been Nikolai who had spoken, with his dark hair and blue eyes. One might think he was handsome, but his personality was far from it. I don't think anyone was asking you what the best position for me to be in is, I replied, acting unbothered as I began to unwrap the bandage on my right hand. I was shaking from exhaustion, and the number of splinters embedded in my hands were far more than I realized. Curvaceous, beautiful, and wolf-less, I think we have ourselves an Omega. And what are they good for, Kyson? Nikolai remarked, a smirk on his face. Anger flared inside of me at the insult. I was no Omega. Fucking, Kyson added arrogantly, his brown eyes glimmering with lust. Exactly, Nikolai replied, his voice laced with amusement. Say that again, and I'll show you what you will or won't be capable of when I am done with you. I hissed, clenching my fists. I see you have quite the tongue on you. Maybe we could put it to better use. Kyson stepped forward. His shoulder-length blonde hair was pulled back in a pony, displaying the scar that ran across his jaw. If he carried on as he was, I wouldn't mind adding another one to his face. I scoffed as I stared at them in disgust. There was no one around for miles, and in the exhausted state I was in, I didn't want to be alone with these 2. How about we do just that? Just looking at her makes me want to bury myself into the little whore. Touch me, Nikolai, and I swear by the goddess I will have you castrated. I think you forget you have no rank anymore. Don't you know what they are saying in court? Theon might be taking the Beta title, and once he does, you become an Omega by default. But play for the right team, and we might just make that experience very pleasurable for you. His words shook me, but I refused to admit that. Was it true? Theon may become Beta. He advanced towards me, making my heart thunder. His eyes were predatory like the animal he was. Unmarked women were just targets for men like them. And one without a wolf was the perfect plaything. I am Yelena Delacour, and until the king himself strips me of my rank, I am still the Beta candidate. I warned, my voice sounding breathless, and shaky even to me, and a beautiful name it is for the flower you are. The king can strip your title, but allow me to strip you of a little more. Nikolai remarked, his eyes darkening with hunger, as his gaze fell to my front and I realized my shirt was sticking to me. Almost completely through thanks to the rain. In a flash, he grabbed my arm, spun me around and tugged my jacket off roughly. I heard Kaisen's sadistic chuckle and felt their eyes on me. Nikolai's hand reached around, grabbing my left breast. "Don't touch me!" I hissed, ripping his hand from my body, twisting back towards them and yanking free from his hold, only for him to grab my hand and squeeze it painfully. I winced as I felt something break, making me gasp in pain. I needed to get away from here now. He slammed me against the tree, the jagged edges of the splinters I had created in the trunk cutting into my back. I could feel them embedded into me, making my eyes water in pain. I raised my hands, using both to try to push him back, but he was a wall of muscle, and one that was not going to budge, no matter how hard I tried. I was as weak as a pup, and he was a full-fledged werewolf. My gaze flickered to Kaisen, who stood there watching. A smirk on his face. As much as I wanted to plead for him to help me, I knew he was waiting his turn. The very thought made me sick. "Let go of me, Nikolai." I growled coldly. He sneered in response, and instead stepped right up to me. Reaching down, he forced my legs apart. I shoved him hard, but he didn't budge. "You will pay for this, Nikolai," I hissed. Will I? Probably not. He was the respected son of one of the highest-ranked families. No, he wouldn't pay because I didn't have my father to protect me anymore. Right now, I was the one who was a no one. Even if no one said it, I knew. He pushed me back roughly, pinning my arms to my side as he forced himself between my legs, and I felt my stomach churn as I felt his hard shaft pressing against me. Immense rage flared inside of me, like a brewing storm, as I struggled in his hold. Did he really find pleasure in this? If there was a time to shift, now would be it. I was using all my willpower and strength to fight him, but I had worn myself down. I felt helpless, useless. Even though I tried so hard and trained so hard, I was still weak. "Calm down, beautiful. Let's put this body to good use," he rasped huskily, making me glare at him in disgust. Had he always been so ugly and sick? "Let me go," I hissed, trying to kick him, but he had my legs clamped between his, restricting me completely. He bent down, one hand squeezing my neck as he forcefully pinned my head back against the tree trunk, his eyes falling to my lips as he licked his hungrily. A move that could look appealing on one person's face, but was sickening on Nikolai's. Using all my might, I tried again and pushed him, making him momentarily loosen his grip. I needed to escape. Taking the chance, I darted to the side, ready to make a run for it when a hand twisted in my hair and yanked me back. "Now she wants to do this the fucking hard way," Nikolai spat. Something hit the back of my head, and I heard Kaisen murmur something as I fell to my knees. He tossed whatever he had hit me with to the ground. "She's done." Nikolai's voice came before I was pushed backwards into the mud. My vision was slightly hazy as my top was ripped off, leaving me exposed in my bra. Nikolai climbed on top of me, pinning my thighs under his knee as he began to unbuckle his pants. "The Alpha will not forgive you," I shouted. He scoffed. "He won't care. You aren't even Beta's Williams's own blood." "I think you were right, Kaisen. She was probably born from an Omega whore." His words hit me hard, my heart thumping in fear. What were they saying? What did he mean? "I'll show you exactly what someone like you deserves." He reached down, ready to unbutton my pants, but I forced myself up. "I'll ask questions later." I needed to get away from here. No matter how terrified and helpless I felt, I was not going to let this happen. My body screamed in response. I brought my knee up and kicked Nikolai in the leg, making him fall back onto the muddy ground. I lurched to my feet and barreled into Kaisen. He staggered and I turned away. I needed to run as far and fast as possible before they succeeded in raping me. "Grab her!" Nikolai growled at Kaisen. I ran blindly, the mud slowing me down, my feet squelching as they sank into the ground. Both men were gaining on me, but luckily being heavier, they were finding it harder to keep up, sinking deeper into the muddy ground. "Don't do something you will regret, you bitch," Nikolai growled just as I stumbled, falling face first into the mud. "I would say the same to you, too, Levin." My head snapped up as a pair of hands grabbed my elbows, lifting me from the ground. Wet strands of coppery brown hair fell over his forehead, rainwater trickling down his perfect features, and I found myself staring into a pair of seductive, yet dangerous amber eyes. "Theon, the heroine is currently facing a difficult situation and needs your support. Please leave your words of encouragement for her in the comments section." Lena, the rain continued to beat down upon us, washing away most of the mud that had splashed in my face. He reached up, brushing my dirty hair back from my face, my eyes fluttered shut under his touch. A touch that I welcomed, a wave of relief washed over me. Theon was many things, mocking, aloof, cold and arrogant, but he was not a monster. "It seems you can't stay out of trouble for even a moment," he murmured quietly, before his eyes sharply snapped to the two men who stood a mere few feet away. "You should leave. Don't interfere where it's not your business." Nikolai's cocky voice came from behind. The gold flash in Theon's eyes made my heart skip a beat, even if the rest of his face remained emotionless, the anger I saw in those eyes. For me, my stomach fluttered before Theon moved me behind him. As warriors of the pack, it's a nice example to set. "This has nothing to do with you. Leave, you saw nothing," Kaisen added coldly. I stared at the back of Theon's head as I crossed my arms over my breasts, hugging myself. I saw enough to take this back to the Alpha. Theon stepped forward, and both men tensed. I frowned as realization hit me. They weren't scared of Theon, but the fact that he may be the future Beta, how rank made you everything or nothing. The two exchanged looks, mind-linking before they glared at me coldly. The silent promise that this was not over was clear in their eyes. Both men walked past us, only for Theon to grab Nikolai by the collar and punch him across the jaw. "What the actual fuck?" Nikolai hissed, clutching his face as he stumbled back. "Touch her again and I will kill you," Theon replied, his voice dangerous and cold. Both men walked off, but Theon turned towards me. I suddenly felt very bare, despite having paraded in front of him only yesterday. Today was different. I suddenly felt dirty and used, the sheer weight of what could have happened crashing down on me. I turned my back on him, not wanting him to see the vulnerable state I was in, the fear that rattled me. My entire body was beyond the point of exhaustion. I gasped when I felt his fingers brush my upper back. I bit my lip when he tugs a lint of wool from me. The silence between us was loud, but I had nothing to say today. My heart thudded when I felt the warmth of his jacket being placed around my shoulders, his scent invading my senses. I closed my eyes, despite the intensity of the comfort it brought me, the sheer reality that I was now a no one. Pretty much alone in this world. Hit me hard. My parents were dead. I couldn't uphold the Delacour name, and I had no one. You have Charlene and Theon. I tried to tell myself, but did I? Let's get out of here. His voice came and I nodded, clutching the jacket around me tightly as he turned away. To my surprise, he took hold of my wrist, glancing at my bruised hands, a frown creasing his brow as he led me away. I looked at his large hand wrapped around the sleeve of his leather jacket, my heart skipping a beat. He had saved me. Theon may become Beta. I glanced up at him sharply, wondering how true that was. Did he know? I was so lost in thought that I didn't even realize we had come to a stop. He pushed open the door to the small cabin. "Where are we?" I asked. "My place." I raised an eyebrow. "You live at the castle." "I have a room at the castle, but this is mine," he corrected. Looking over at me, I realized that I had actually never been here. But how much did I really know about Theon? Not much. He didn't really share, nor did I bother to ask. "Are you planning on letting the rain continue to flood the place?" I blinked and quickly stepped out of the doorway, about to shut it when he leaned over me. Snapping it shut, my heart skipped a beat as he flipped the light on, and I took a good look around me. It was simple and clean, with a small kitchen area and a table with 2 chairs was standing to one side. On the other side, a 2-seater sofa was opposite the fireplace, with a coffee table before it and 2 large bookshelves on either side of the fireplace. 2 doors led off the room, most likely to the bedroom and bathroom. Theon walked across the room, and through one of the doors, I peered inside, seeing the edge of a bed from where I stood. I turned away, glancing up at the ceiling with the wooden beams and the iron filigree light shades. I had to admit the place looked very cozy. His scent lingered in the air. I wonder how much time he spent here. I looked down at the mud we had stained the ground with, and slowly stepped out of my boots, not wanting to spread the mud and water everywhere. I clutched Theon's jacket around me. Must I give it back? Go shower. I looked up as Theon stepped out of his room, holding a shirt and some sweatpants. "His clothes." "Thanks," I replied, walking over to him. I took the clothes gingerly, careful not to dirty them. "Wear the shirt back to front. I'll check your back over," he said just when I turned away, making me freeze. Check my back. He was going to check it. "I don't need. It's that. Or we go to the royal healer. Take your pick." He cut in coldly. I frowned. What happened wasn't something I wanted others to know. It wasn't going to help my case in any way, and the rumors would spread fast. I entered the bathroom, shutting the door behind me, and hung the clean clothes up on the peg behind the door before I took his jacket off. Mud covered the lining and I felt guilty. I'll rinse them off once I had rinsed the mud off myself, I decided. I turned the shower head on and placed my hand under it, waiting for the water to warm, and quickly stripped out of my clothes, carefully placing my panties aside. They weren't as wet as the rest of my clothes and I needed to wear them. I stepped into the tub and under the water, welcoming the warmth of the hot water, letting it soothe my aching bones. Once I had soaped myself clean and realized that I smelt a little like Theon thanks to his body wash, I stepped out of the shower and grabbed one of his towels. I dried myself quickly and then walked over to my muddy clothes, dumping them into the tub I had just gotten out of, and quickly felt inside of Theon's jacket pockets. Taking out a few explosive enchantments and 2 small daggers, I placed them aside and dumped his jacket into the bath too. Scanning the bathroom, I looked in the drawer under the wash basin, but didn't find any washing powder. I guess he took his clothes to the castle to have washed. Omegas or the human staff would usually do all the chores like this, and someone of Theon's status would have 1 or 2 Omegas attending to him personally, that I was sure of. Remembering what Nikolai said made a pang of jealousy flood inside of me. Theon was a young man, one who would obviously have needs. Did he have Omegas for his sexual desires? Or maybe he visited the White Dove. A deep frown settled on my face as my thoughts got darker and darker. After wringing out the clothes, I draped them over the edge of the tub and toweled myself dry before slipping my panties on. My body was screaming with exhaustion, and the urge to just curl up into a ball and go to sleep threatened to consume me. I examined the pants before pulling them on, tying them tightly by the drawstring at my waist. Last of all, the shirt. I slip it on backwards, flinching slightly as I reached behind and closed one button. I looked at my bruised hands and sighed, picking out a few splinters before I clutched the towel and stepped out of the bathroom. I looked around, noticing the curtains were drawn, the lights were switched on, the floor was clean from all the mud and water, and both our shoes stood by the front door. Clean. The hearth was lit, with a blazing fire that warmed the entire room up. I looked over at Theon, who was pouring what smelt like coffee into 2 mugs. I couldn't resist a small smile from crossing my lips. I don't think I had ever seen Theon do anything so ordinary. I wasn't sure if it was the right word, but he still looked far too handsome whilst doing something like that. He glanced at me, raising an eyebrow, and I shook my head quickly, turning away, trying not to blush. I went over to the sofa and took a seat staring at the shelves. Most looked like history books, although there were some training ones and others on other subjects. "Don't be nosy," he remarked, placing the 2 mugs on the table, and I took a moment to drink up his muscular biceps. Oh goddess, this man is made to sin. May I be the subject of that sin? I frowned at the thought, remembering the incident with Nikolai. "Drink it whilst it is warm," he said, taking a seat on the sofa, and I suddenly became very aware that this was the first time we were in a private place, alone. I reached for the mug, my arms screaming with agony, when he grabbed hold of my wrist, pulling me back. "Are you simply stupid or incredibly reckless?" He raised an eyebrow, giving me a cold gaze. My heart skipped a beat when he took my hand in his, using the other hand to feel my bones, cricking a few as he went. I bit my lip at one point, trying not to pay attention to the tingles that danced up my hand and arm at his touch. He dropped my hand, taking the other, and picked out a few pieces of wood that my body hadn't automatically rejected. Ouch! I winced when he pulled out a thin piece of splinter that was embedded in my finger. He glanced up at me before he let go of my hand. "You didn't answer that question." "I didn't realize it was a question," I replied. Reaching over, I grabbed the mug, the shirt I was wearing slid off my shoulder, and I placed my free hand on my chest, moving back slowly. I inhaled the milky coffee, relishing the smell before I took a sip. Theon had made coffee. For me. Oh, I couldn't wait to tell Charlene. Wait, can I tell her this? No, if she knew what happened, she wouldn't be happy. I sipped the coffee, enjoying the silence as Theon picked up his own mug and downed it in a few gulps, making my eyes widen. "Wasn't that hot?" I asked in surprise. He raised an eyebrow. "Not for me. I can handle the heat. We aren't all babies." His mocking, arrogant tone made me narrow my eyes. "I am not a baby. No. Maybe not." "Want to share exactly how stuff went down that path?" he asked. The mood darkening instantly, I shook my head. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone you didn't even do anything wrong or anything to instigate that? Nikolai's words were spinning in my head, only adding to the exhaustion I was feeling. Aren't even Beta Williams's own blood. Theon might be taking the Beta title. Turn around. His command pulled me from my thoughts, and I glanced down at the white shirt that was covering me before staring into his eyes. A glint of something I couldn't make out flickered in them. But his gaze didn't falter, as if challenging me to refuse. I clutched the shirt tightly and slowly turned my back towards him, holding my mug steadily with both hands now. I bit my lip, trying to ignore my hammering heart that I knew he could hear too. I stared down at my mug as I felt him tug on the shirt slightly as he undid the button. His eyes were burning into me and my stomach fluttered as the shirt fell open, revealing my back to him. His heart was steady, and I wondered why he had such an effect on me. I hissed when he pulled the first of the splinters from my back. "You have a few, and you've begun healing, embedding them into your skin. Great. Hold still." I rolled my eyes. I was still. My eyes flew open when his hand went to my waist, gripping it tightly, sending a strong jolt of pleasure through me. "Goddess, don't let him hear my heartbeat." He pulled out another splinter, making me flinch as a sharp stab of pain shot up my back. That one was deep, I nodded, unable to focus with his hand still gripping my waist. Goddess. His touch was like a drug, intoxicating and dangerous, yet so tempting, and made me feel all lightheaded. I felt a trickle of fresh blood drip down my back, and Theon's thumb brush it up, igniting a trail of sparks in his wake. Perfect. I turned just in time to see him lick the blood off his thumb, making my stomach flip and my core throb with a desire that he alone could ignite. His gaze flickered to mine, and those intense amber eyes fell to my lips, and then I heard it. The slight change to the beat of his heart. Lena. I quickly turned away, my cheeks burning as I gulped the rest of the coffee down. I felt him move away, so I quickly placed my mug down and stood up, trying not to groan at the ache in my muscles. I slid my arms out of the shirt, holding it firmly as I twisted it around, sliding my arms back in and buttoned it up. I turned back towards him, his arms now spread over the top of the couch as he glared into the fire. His brows creased in concentration. Thanks for saving me, I remarked gratefully, tugging at the sleeves of the shirt and stared down at the ground. I surely must look a sight in these oversized pants and shirt. Now, what do? I sat down on the small couch and pulled my knees up against my chest, feeling exhausted. You may not have been at their level, but you shouldn't push yourself to that extent where you cannot even defend yourself, especially somewhere secluded. I didn't think that would happen. I just thought to train. I am lacking in far more than shifting. I whispered, very aware of his hand near my head on the back of the couch. Are you? Or are you allowing others to dictate that? He asked, tilting his head as he looked at me, his hair almost glowing a gorgeous copper in the light of the fire from the hearth. It's true though, isn't it? I am not strong enough. I am nearly 18, but I haven't shifted. I glanced into the flickering flames, frowning. There's already talk that I may be stripped of my rank. I looked up into his gorgeous eyes, waiting for a reaction. Anything to tell me what his opinion on that was. He looked away, and into the flames for a second, before his gaze snapped back to mine. Who told you? He asked, making my stomach sink. So, he knew. He knew the alpha wanted to make him beta. I didn't know why that hurt as much as it did. What was I expecting? For him to care. For him to come and tell me. Does it matter? I replied, looking down at my knees, unable to hide the bitterness from my voice. The alpha only mentioned it a week or so ago. Nothing is finalized. There's still time. Each word was like a punch in the gut. The tears that I had been suppressing seemed to be on the verge of breaking their dam. Still time. If he gives you the title, you will take it because he is your king, I said, forcing a smile. His face remained emotionless as he looked at me. No one refuses the alpha. Yeah. I needed to get out of here. I shouldn't be here. We weren't friends. Just two people who were always by the princess' side. I'm going to head out. Thank you, I whispered, sounding weaker than I was meant to. Yelena. I stood up, staggering slightly. My legs felt like lead and my entire body was aching from the workout. I am going to head back. I walked to the door, my eyes on my shoes. Just like that, the Delacour name would vanish. You can't even walk straight. I could smell him behind me. Goddess, he moved so silently. I can manage, I replied coldly. I need no one. I just about pulled one shoe on when he grabbed my elbow, yanking me back roughly. I gasped, almost stumbling, but before I could fall, he slammed me up against the wall. What are you doing? I hissed venomously, proving my point. You are not leaving this place until you are up to it. You can't keep me here. Nikolai and Kaisen are out there. Are you sure you want to go back in this weather, all alone? I never knew you cared. I shot back. For a moment, he stared into my eyes, before he let go of me, letting me fall to the ground. I don't get out, he replied coldly. I'll do exactly that. I pulled on my shoes with weak hands, realizing if I stepped out into the rain, my shirt would become entirely see-through. I looked around before walking back over to the couch and picking up the blanket that was draped over the armchair. I'll return this. No one's allowing you to borrow it. And with that, he yanked it from my hold, his gaze dipping to my breasts, which were moving far too much without my bra. If you want to leave, it's going to be like that. He turned away, throwing the blanket onto the sofa. I was leaving, one way or another. I yanked the door open without another word and hurried out into the rain, my arms crossed over my chest as I became instantly drenched. I didn't glance back, and when the door shut, it didn't bother me. The future Beta. Beta Theon. Nice. I knew I was being bitter, but it did hurt. I dragged my feet towards the castle. I needed to speak to the Alpha. Nikolai said I wasn't my father's blood. What did he mean by that? I was relieved that I didn't really meet anyone on the way home, and when I snuck into the castle, I was glad that there weren't many people around. Save the guards on duty. My body was ready to collapse by the time I reached my quarters. I cursed, realizing my key was in the pocket of my pants. Pants I had left at Theon's along with my bra. Oh goddess! Now what? I looked down the hall, tempted to go to Charlene. But now wasn't the time to disturb her. I am sure she was having dinner with her family. I'd ask the head Omega, or I'd just wait here. I felt far too tired to go in search of anyone, and so I slid down the wall and curled up in a ball, wrapping my arms around my shivering cold body tightly. I'll just rest a little. Jian, 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 jian. I felt someone move me, but my eyes refused to open. In the hazy state of my mind, I had a feeling that the scent was somehow familiar as strong arms lifted me from the ground. The sound of a key scraping in a lock could be heard. Open your eyes. Yelena. I couldn't. I felt like dead weight as my head lolled backwards. Whoever was holding me didn't really seem to care. The familiar scent of Mom's cocoa butter candles seeped into my nose. Home? The man's footsteps creaked on the wooden floor. I managed to crack them open ever so slightly, but I felt like I was somewhere far away. I wasn't sure. I was in my house. I could see that from the angle my head was tilted. It was all I saw before my eyes fluttered close once again. Get up. But I was far too gone for that. I felt myself being placed on a bed. My bed feeling fingers brushing my hair back ever so slowly. It almost reminded me of Mom's soothing touch. But it was different. I couldn't explain it. Comforting. And then I heard the door shut before darkness welcomed me back into its folds. Seriously, Yelena, who trains out in the cold like that? We are werewolves, not immortals. Charlene scolded as she motioned with her eyes for me to eat the bowl of soup. You know, I hate soup. You don't hate it, you dislike it, but it's good for you now, eat. She cajoled firmly. I was sitting in bed. It was the following afternoon, and I had slept most of the day until Charlene had shown up an hour ago, banging on my door, which was locked, and I had found the key on the floor. Theon. It had to be. He must have found the key in my pants. What was he doing looking in them in the first place? Anyway, Charlene had shown up demanding entrance and had made me take a hot bath, which I won't lie made me feel much better. But the bowl of soup from the head chef wasn't appetizing. The truth is, the only soup I ate was Mom's. I promised her I'd only eat her soup or none. And somehow, I just couldn't stomach the bowl before me. I am not hungry, Charl. Please. I pleaded. She looked down at me with concern in her green eyes. What is it? Lena, she whispered, sitting down on my bed and taking my hands in hers. I shook my head, refusing to let my emotions get the better of me. I only eat Mom's soup. I managed to reply, trying to remain strong. Oh, darling. She wrapped her arms around me tightly, and I rested my head on her slender shoulder, fighting back my tears. I'll have something else brought right away. I am not really hungry. I refused, moving back. I was wearing a large, oversized shirt that used to belong to Dad. I loved stealing his clothes because they were so comfortable, and now that he was gone, it was all I really had of him. Memories. This entire place held memories. Would I have to move out? Is the Alpha working today? I asked casually. Dad is, as always, she responded. Maybe once Charlene leaves, I'll go visit him. I needed to ask what Nikolai meant about me not being Dad's daughter. A light knock on the door to my quarters reached my ears and Charlene jumped up, her ginger hair bouncing around her. I'll grab it, I nodded, and dropped back onto my pillow once more, looking around my room. The walls were painted in off-white, and the floor was solid wood. My furniture was all wood, including my bed. There were paintings on the wall, some with just quotes, others made by me or Dad, and a few that I had brought from our journeys out of Westerfell, one from when we went on a journey out of our kingdom of a stallion. Dad! 2 pairs of footsteps approached. I quickly pulled my shirt down over my thighs, just as Theon and Charlene appeared at the door. Charlene was holding a brown bag that clearly contained food. You brought food. I never knew the princess's guard was also a delivery boy, I remarked, trying to calm the nerves that erupted inside of me as I sat up. The memory of what had happened at his place yesterday was fresh in my mind. Our eyes met, and I swallowed, seeing his gaze flicker to my bare thighs before he looked back into my eyes, and I quirked a brow. Seems you are healed, he remarked, turning away and crossing his arms as he leaned against the door frame as Charlene brought the bag over. I rolled my eyes almost scoffing. My legs didn't have bruises. I wasn't ready to tell Charlene what happened, but I did want to ask Theon if he was the one who brought me inside. All right. Eat the sandwich up, and there's apple pie. She unwrapped the items, and I took the sandwich, lost in my own thoughts. I needed to talk to the king immediately. Once Charlene had finished fussing over me, I tried not to meet Theon's burning gaze as he stood there before I was finally left alone. Luckily, the queen had called Charlene to meet someone or other, and both had left, but not before Theon's burning, emotionless gaze met mine. Once again, I couldn't make out what was going on in that mind of his. Quickly getting dressed, I left my quarters feeling tired and exhausted. The aftereffect of the rain and training still left its mark, and my muscles groaned with every step I took. I saw a pair of guards walk past, and I called out to them. "Excuse me, do you know where the Alpha is?" I asked. One of them raised an eyebrow, whilst the other one's eyes softened slightly. "Of course, dear, he's out in the courtyard. He was training, but he is done for now," he replied. The perks of the mind link. That was another one I heard from the people. If she had her wolf, she could have pre-warned us about the attack. "Thank you," I replied politely before turning and hurrying down the hall. I hoped the Alpha would be willing to talk, because I needed answers. I reached the courtyard to see him sitting on the steps, peeling the skin of an apple. On the stone steps next to him was a bowl of fruit. I glanced around, but he appeared to be alone. "May I speak to you, Alpha?" I asked. Once upon a time, as a child, I used to address him as uncle, but as I got older, I started calling him Alpha, and that stuck. More so now that Dad was gone, that connection was also no more. "Sure, what is it, Yelena?" The Alpha turned. His hair framing his face only added to his dangerous look, and I lowered my head before stepping down into the grass and turning to face him. The knife in his hand was large, and I watched as he made slices out of the apple. "Speak up!" I blinked and nodded. I had 2 questions, Alpha Andres. Yesterday an Epsilon-ranked warrior told me that I'm not my father's blood. I asked. The words hurt even as I spoke them. It still hurt so much. His face didn't change as he ate a slice of apple, munching into it before putting 2 more in his mouth. Rumors. People want to spread those rumors because you're not living up to your status, he replied. A wave of relief flooded through me despite the insult that was thrown in there. I was my father's daughter. Of course I was, but his following words felt like a few punches in the gut. But the truth is, all rumors start somewhere. I never saw your mother pregnant, so who knows exactly where you're from? Was your mother unable to carry? Did your father have you by a whore? It doesn't matter. He was always adamant you were his. As was your mother, whether I believe it or not, they stuck by it. But the truth is, you hold no power to show that you are part of the Delacour family. Lena. The following morning dawned clear yet cold. The sun was shining, deceptive of the temperature outside. Great. The weather was getting worse as winter approached. I had just bathed and was toweling my hair dry as I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my room. I paused, tilting my head as I observed my body, an hourglass body with larger breasts than average. With the light of the sun shining through the window, the water that clung to my body almost looked like little crystals clinging to me. Creamy, smooth skin that Charlene always said looked breathtakingly flawless. Curvy hips that irked me as they indeed reminded me of the Omegas. And thighs far thicker than the lean ones I was used to seeing on most werewolf women. I sighed. Turning away from my reflection and tossing my towel aside, today was the day. Charlene was going to begin her training. Perhaps I could also pick up on some of the stuff that Theon would teach her. I grabbed some black leather pants, squeezing into them and picking out one of Dad's oversized white shirts, tying it up with one of my leather corset belts. I rummaged through Mom's items, selecting a checked black and white hair scrunchie and smiling fondly. Mom loved to do her hair. She often styled and braided mine as well. I was no good with this sort of thing myself. I tied my hair into a high pony, remembering when Mom did about 30 small braids in my hair. Oh, I had loved them, and when I opened them, my hair had been really pretty and crimped. She had told me on my 18th she'll do the same. I swallowed, exhaling deeply. I shouldn't have been there. I cost them their lives. I pulled on some boots, leaving my apartment and heading towards Charlene's quarters. To my relief, she was just exiting her bedroom, whilst Theon stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed in a dark maroon t-shirt with a V-neck and some black pants and boots. "Ready?" Charlene asked. Her hair was pulled into a sleek bun on top of her head. She wore tan pants and a matching crop top. Now my girl is sexy. I am sure Theon was going to secretly enjoy teaching her. Yes, I liked the guy, but if there was one person I wouldn't be bitter over having him, it was Charlene. I'd die for her, although I don't think Theon had anything but his damn looks going for him. Arrogant jerk. "Shall we go, my angel?" Charlene asked me, a smile on her face as she linked arms with me. "Right away, my queen." "Where to?" Charlene asked Theon. He didn't even look at her, stepping ahead of us and led the way without even speaking a word. I rolled my eyes, exchanging looks with Charlene. "At least we get a nice view," she mouthed, pointing at Theon's ass. I smirked and nodded my agreement. Damn, this man had an ass you just wanted to touch. We were as bad as all the men around. Theon led us away from the castle, past the trees and down towards the coast. It wasn't far from where we had gone the other day, but he didn't stop there. He kept on going, making us head down the rock path, the water not far from our feet. If we were to go down here, wouldn't traveling in wolf form be better? Charlene asked, As her foot skidded on the wet path, Theon paused and turned towards us. Not everyone is capable of shifting. His eyes met mine, and I raised an eyebrow. Good things take time, Charlene defended. Besides, if we shifted, I'd carry her. No, Theon can. Have you ever carried someone on your back, princess? Theon's voice was cold. As he continued walking, no. But, are you used to rocky, uneven terrain? No. But so is the plan to drop her on her head and crack open her already empty skull. Hey! I frowned. Charlene furrowed her brow, looking down, clearly disappointed. It was a suggestion. Unthought-out suggestions can kill. Use the brain you were given. His words were cold and harsh. I saw Charlene flinch at them. At least he knows you have a brain, I comforted, giving her hand a squeeze. I held onto her tightly as her foot skidded once more. Theon was right on one point. Charlene hadn't really had the experience in such places. Dad used to take me to all kinds of places to train. I remember fighting Dad on a plank in the middle of the ocean, and every time I fell in the water I had to be careful something didn't attack me. But then again, I loved the water even if it was dangerous. We finally came to a stop, and Theon turned to face us, inspecting both of us. Charlene was a little breathless, and I was simply frowning. Begin? Sparring. What? Wasn't that his job? To teach Charlene. Why else are you here? Now start. I turned to Charlene. We had sparred many times, but something told me Theon didn't mean a friendly match. Charlene fell into her stance, and I motioned for her to throw the first punch. She preferred defense, but Theon would be watching her. She lunged at me and I blocked through my own jab. Fight like it is real. Theon's voice cut in. I am not hurting her, I replied, sensing the irritation in his cold voice. The Alpha has given me a job, and unless you want me to take your place, you will do as I say. Listen to him, Lena, Charlene replied. Her face was serious. I wondered if she knew about the prophecy. She must be feeling the same pressure that I was, to live up to the expectations set out for us. Then attack me, I replied softly. She frowned and nodded before she spun and lashed out at me. I raised my arm, blocking her, spinning around and hit her chest. She stumbled and my eyes widened. Sorry. Continue. Theon's voice cut in sharply. Charlene threw a punch, and I ducked, kicking her legs out from underneath her. She gasped when she hit the rough ground, and my heart leapt in worry. I held a hand out to help her up, when Theon knocked it aside. Useless. The both of you. We're trying, Charlene said, struggling to her feet, massaging her head. My stomach sank when I saw the blood that mixed in with her ginger hair and stained her fingers. I just couldn't do this. So, the future alpha of the pack is being defeated by a wolf-less woman? Theon questioned, a small sneer on his face as he looked at Charlene. I hated his words, but the fact he called me a woman, that sent my stomach into a fluttery mess, much to my irritation. She doesn't like to hurt me because I am her friend, I added in her defense. The weak always die. Very well then, I'll spar with you. Theon stepped forward and Charlene paled. We both knew no matter how handsome and sexy we found him, he was ruthless, and he wouldn't hold back from doing actual damage. They began sparring, and it was obvious that Theon wasn't even giving it his all. With every fist that connected with Charlene's slender frame, my own anger began to rise. This is far too brutal for her first day, I growled. She's been training all her life, Theon remarked, his boot-clad foot connecting with her stomach, knocking her back a few feet before she tumbled to the ground, rolling over several times before she came to a stop. Get up, Theon! I went to help Charlene up, but Theon grabbed my arm, stopping me. One more step, little storm, and you're next. His cold eyes turned to me, and my irritation arose. This isn't teaching, it's beating. It's called survival. And it is high time you both learned that. I stepped back when Charlene gave me a smile, telling me she was okay. Was this what was wrong with me? That I wasn't doing enough? Was I really not pushing myself hard enough? I watched them spar, and every time Charlene got up, he knocked her back down, criticizing her footing, her strength, and her analyzing skills. My nails dug into my palms as I clenched my fists. Every time Charlene hit the floor, it was painful to watch, and I wished it was me getting hurt. Enough! I shouted when Charlene hit the floor once again and Theon's fist stopped inches from her stomach. This time, Charlene didn't protest as she rolled onto all fours and struggled to sit up. Cuts and bruises covered her, and she was bleeding. I don't think the alpha will approve, I hissed, helping her up to a sitting position. He gave me permission to train her as I deem fit, and I am getting irritated with you constantly challenging my orders. His eyes flashed with a hue of gold, and he yanked me away from Charlene, gripping both of my upper arms as he glared down at me. You had the chance to spar with her, you failed. So, this is my fault? Watch and learn, he said icily, looking down at Charlene before pulling me away from her. I wrenched free from his hold as he rolled his neck. Let's see how long you last, in comparison to our future alpha. The insult in his tone grated on my nerves, and I fell into my stance. I didn't wait for his signal and spun forward, feinting a kick to his thigh, but instead, I aimed a hit for his chest. He blocked both, grabbing my wrist. He twisted me and pulled me closer. My back grazed his chest, his seductive scent filling my senses. Far too slow. He pushed me away and I spun around, not wasting another moment, and aimed a few kicks. Each one was easily blocked by him, and then I realized he wasn't throwing any hits. Can't find an opening? I taunted, raising an eyebrow. Sure I can. Just find it pretty amusing that you're trying so hard. His mocking reply came. I narrowed my eyes. If he wanted to play like that, I twisted around, about to kick him in the crotch when he frowned, his hand shooting out and wrapping around my neck at the same time. He knocked my foot aside. And if this was a real fight, I would have had snapped your neck by now. He looked down at me, his gaze dipping to my heaving chest, and he smirked. Out of breath already. Weak. He wasn't even breathless. This wasn't fair. But fights usually aren't. Is grabbing someone by their throat your favorite move? I snipped in. If it's yours. Yes? My eyes flew open, my core clenching at the words that could mean something entirely different. Well then, it's getting boring. I shot back, trying to swallow, only for him to tighten his hold. He leant down, his lips almost brushing my ear and his voice dropping a few octaves. Then, maybe we should take it up a notch. His minty breath fanned my ear as his thumb caressed the center of my neck. My eyes fluttered shut, unable to stop the intense surge of emotions and desire that coursed through me. Goddess. No thanks. I managed to whisper, forcing myself back to reality. Then, stop disobeying me. I don't answer to you, I reminded him, glaring into his eyes with defiance. Not caring that his arm was now pressing against my breasts, the urge to hurt him and show him that he wasn't invincible consumed me. I was once told the ear is quite a sensitive part of our body. Either you like a punishment, or you really are stupid. Who knows? Taking the chance as his eyes locked with mine, I yanked his head forward, snaking my hand around his neck and sank my blunt teeth into his earlobe. Tugging hard. Oh, how I wish I had my canines! A low growl reverberated from his chest, and I thought I felt something throb against my stomach. But it was fleeting, my own heart hammering when he yanked away as if he had just been burned, and for the first time since I'd seen him, his eyes were filled with surprise. A trickle of blood dripped down his neck from his ear. Our eyes were locked on one another, and I was unable to stop myself from licking the droplets of blood that colored my lips. His eyes shimmered a dazzling gold as they dipped to my lips. Lena. She wins, right? Charlene's tired yet happy voice came, snapping us both out of our trance. We're taking a break. Theon's cold reply came, turning away swiftly as he walked off down towards the water. My heart was thumping as the moment played out. OMG! Charlene hissed, grabbing my arm, her eyes wide as she stared at me. I blinked, trying to focus on what was happening. What? I whispered. You two had a moment. She hissed, her eyes alight with excitement. My cheeks burned, and I rolled my eyes. We didn't. I bit his ear, I pouted. Lena. Do you think you could have gotten that close without him noticing? He was far too distracted by you, and that growl. It sounded more possessive, and one of approval, than an angry one. Okay, she had officially lost her mind. I rolled my eyes again, shaking my head. Stop rolling your eyes before they vanish into the back of your head. She hissed. Yeah, then I'll be wolf-less. And eyeless. I shook my head, trying to focus. Okay. I think you really hit your head harder than I initially thought. Charles, you have no idea what you're going on about. Trust me, Theon dislikes me. Well, not once did he knock you on your ass. Instead, he kept pulling you into his arms or holding you when fighting you. I want that. She whined with a pout, making me giggle as she stomped her foot. Ah, my beautiful queen, how can I make it up to you? Shall we head back and make him panic? I suggested, slyly wiggling my eyebrow at her. Her eyes widened before a sly smile crossed her face. Ooh, let's hide instead, she affirmed, grabbing my hand as she pulled me away from the rocky edge. I glanced over my shoulder to see Theon running his fingers through his hair, his back to us as he gazed out at the water. And then he disappeared from view as Charlene tugged me away. This is totally on him if we get lost. She groaned. I feel awful all over. You know we still have more training and I swear he's going to torture us for this when he finds us. I whispered, stumbling on some loose rocks and glancing down at the water that hit the rocks. The water was a lot harsher here, crashing against the walls of the rocks as if venting its anger. I frowned watching the dark colors. It was interesting how narrow River Roseweavern was, and so different from the waters of the mighty gulf just around the corner. Enraged, dark, almost bitter. Yelena? I blinked, dragging my eyes from the water to see Charlene point to what looked like a large rock. We can hide down there, and the water will disguise our scents. I don't know. That's too close to the waters. It's not night yet, darling, Charlene rebutted, linking arms with me as she tugged me onwards. I glanced back towards the angry water, trying to look into its depth. But the darkness was far too deep. The sun was shining. It was okay, right? The stories of avoiding the dark waters that Mom used to tell me hummed in my mind. And I shook my head. Okay, I guess I needed to stop being paranoid. Pushing my thoughts aside, I followed Charlene down the path, grabbing hold of her arm when she stumbled. I am fine. She smiled up at me. I don't want anything to happen to you, I murmured, glancing at the water again. Relax, my beautiful angel, Charlene replied, almost as if she was trying to soothe me. We reached our destination and hopped onto the rock that jutted out of the water, then crouched behind it. Now we wait for Theon to track us. She giggled. I smiled, amused, as I leaned back against the damp surface of the rock. You know he's going to be pissed, I murmured, reaching over and placing her head on my shoulder. She smiled and nodded. Of course, it's payback for beating me black and blue. Honestly, when I thought of Theon training me, I was imagining something a little more like what went down between you two, all up in each other's personal space. I frowned, no longer able to focus on her voice. There was another sound. Something alluring coming from somewhere, a soft song maybe. Music. My eyes were fixed on the water ahead. It was still raging roughly. A few broken logs and branches were riding the waves, and the way the wood splintered against the rocky cliffs on the other side told me it was indeed rough. Charlene was still talking as I felt a pull towards the waters. I leaned forward about to reach for it, wanting to feel it against my fingertips, when I was pulled back. "Yelena?" Charlene looked startled as she started at me in concern. "What are you?" A splash in the water made both of us turn, and to my utter horror, I saw deep red hair floating just beneath the surface, before it emerged from the water. My heart thundered as I stared at the thing before me. One I had only heard of in stories. I knew they were here. I knew they were forever close. But never did I think I'd see one so clearly in broad daylight. Her skin was smooth. A soft violet sheen seemed to glow from it. The water clung to her like sparkling gems in her eyes, a mix of purples and silvers, rimmed with long, thick lashes. She was terrifyingly beautiful, and when she smiled, her teeth were sharp like razors, giving away that she was indeed a monster. Her eyes were fixed on Charlene as she licked her plump lips. Her breasts were bare, with just a thin woven piece of seaweed squeezing them together, covering her nipples, and I didn't need to look down to prove that I was looking at none other than a siren. Her tail, that shimmered in hues of deep purple that looked almost black, was behind her. And when she launched herself at us, a scream left my lips as I pushed Charlene behind me. Her long claws slashed into me, and I hissed in pain. "Charl, run!" I shouted as the siren grabbed my leg. A soft song began to leave her lips, and I saw Charlene's eyes become hooded. No, Charlene. Reaching over, I managed to slap her across the face, knocking some sense into her. I needed to shut this siren up before she did more damage. "Theon's coming," she whimpered. "Thank the goddess for mind, Link." Charlene lashed out, but the siren was winning. Charlene grabbed my arms, trying to keep me from being dragged into the depths of the water. "Just let go." No. The siren suddenly grabbed onto her, her long nails digging into her arm, dragging her into the water. "Yelena!" My heart skipped a beat at the sound of Theon's voice. It was the last words I heard before. I was pulled under, and the ethereal song filled my ears once again. Was Charlene okay? I couldn't see her. My only consolation was that Theon was coming for her. I struggled against the iron grip of the siren. But was it worth it? The pain, the agony, the loss of my parents. This felt, my eyes fluttered as I stared into the beautiful eyes of the siren, goddess. She was gorgeous. Welcoming. But this wasn't right. The enchanting song continued, but it wasn't having the effect she wanted on me. I could see that. It came to an abrupt end, and I didn't feel as confused anymore. "Come to me, my love," she whispered seductively, despite the confusion within her eyes. The haze seemed to have lifted, and when her arms snaked around me, yanking me against her, alarm bells were going off in my head. The moment her cold lips touched mine, I suddenly felt as if my body was weighing down. But then, she was ripped away from me. Blood tainted the water and I saw her head torn from her body. My eyes blurry as I looked at the man before me. Her body fizzled away into foam, and then it was just gone. The powerful waves hit me, and I felt myself being pulled deeper. A strong arm wrapped around my waist, and I looked into the handsome face of my savior. Theon. He swam upwards, and soon we broke the surface. "Fuck!" he cursed, pulling me onto the rocky ground, his hand checking my pulse, the other brushing my hair back. Charlene. Where was Charlene? bleeding. I couldn't understand him until I felt my corset belt being torn off and my shirt being lifted up. Charlene, I croaked, coughing up water, my lungs heaving as they sucked in the air that I direly needed. He tensed before he pulled back and jumped back into the water. I rolled over onto my side, hissing at the pain in my left hip. I pulled my top up, staring at the claw marks embedded deep into my skin. When did she manage to hurt me there? Charlene's gasp made me look to the water to see Theon, with Charlene in his arms. To my relief, she looked unharmed as he placed her on the rocks next to me, his eyes on me. My heart thundered, seeing the anger clear in his. Involuntarily, I found myself moving back, almost ready for his wrath to be unleashed. "You almost died," he hissed, glaring at me. His anger was obviously directed at me, and it made sense. I should have taken better care of Charlene. We didn't think something like this would happen, I whispered. "It's not her. I am not talking to you." Theon cut in dangerously, raising his finger at her in warning. His gaze was fixed on me. "Do you really want to die? Because if that's your wish, I wouldn't mind fulfilling it." His words cut me deeply, and I frowned. It was daytime. I didn't think that there would be a siren out here. Also, she said not to. I was the one who was behind this, Charlene intervened, her eyes filled with guilt as she stared at my hip. "Well, congratulations, princess. Your spoiled behavior and petty quims almost cost you your friend." He stood up, whipping his hair off his forehead as he glanced back at the water. "Let's head back. We will continue with training tomorrow." I gripped the side of the rock, struggling to my feet as Charlene did the same. She was exhausted. I could see it from her face, even when she grabbed my arm, wrapping it around her neck to support me. Theon glanced back at us as we began walking, pain shooting up my hip and waist. "Fuck, I wish I had my wolf so I could heal faster." He stopped, looking at me with anger simmering in his eyes. "Boy, if looks could kill." He turned, yanking me away from Charlene's hold, making me wince in pain at the rough tug. I gripped my hip as I bumped into his hard chest, almost tumbling back, but his arms snaked around my waist, keeping me against him before he scooped me up bridal style, not even bothering to look at me as he adjusted me in his arms, and continued walking. My heart fluttered, very aware of his hand that was on the side of my breast, the other hooked under my knees. I snaked an arm around his neck gingerly, looking at Charlene over his shoulder. She was grinning widely and gave me the thumbs up. I wasn't sure if she sensed the anger that was radiating off him, and the tension that was clear in his top muscles. Would I have to thank him for saving me again? I guess I should be humble and thank him. This silence was becoming too much. "Theon." His burning gaze fell on me, and my stomach twisted when I saw the gold hue that had overtaken his usual amber eyes, making all words die on my lips. He wasn't just angry. He was absolutely fuming. My stomach sank as he turned his gaze back on the rock path. Something told me this was not over. Lena. The moment we returned to the palace, Theon had told one of the other royal guards to escort Charlene to the healers for a checkover. I need to go." A withering glare made me go quiet. I needed a healer too. "She needs to be checked. Take care of yourself first, princess." Theon's icy reply came, cutting Charlene off. I exchanged looks with Charlene, but neither of us spoke, knowing that if he told the king what happened, we were entirely screwed. All the way back, Charlene had kept on saying it was her fault and she was ready to take the responsibility. But Theon had ignored her. I knew she was trying to drill it into him that I had nothing to do with it, but I did. I should have been more responsible. "I can walk," I declared as we headed towards my quarters. He came to a sudden stop, not even looking at me, and dropped me, making me gasp as I landed hard on my ass on the floor. Pain jolted up my side, making my eyes sting with tears. Goddess. Walk, then. He crossed his arms, his eyes simmering as he looked down at me. I frowned, forcing myself to my feet. The pain from the injury was excruciating. See? I replied haughtily, clutching my injured side as I limped along, gripping onto the wall. I needed a healer, but I couldn't even mind Link. Why didn't he let me go straight to the infirmary? Sure, the poison from a siren's claw will kill you slowly, he remarked to my annoyance, following me down the hall. This was so hard as it was. I paused, unable to go further, needing a break. I leaned against the wall, breathing heavily as I looked up at him. Yeah, I've heard. How about you be so nice as to call a healer for me? I asked, trying not to scream as a flare of pain shot through me. You seem capable enough. I felt my own irritation growing. What is your problem, Theon? What have I ever done that makes you so angry towards me? Just get me a damn healer, please. I turned away, not wanting him to see my tears. I gasped when his hand went to my shoulder, spinning me around rather harshly, but just then we heard footsteps and we both turned to see one of the healers walking toward us. Miss Delacour, Master Theon. I came as fast as I could. The elderly male with a long white beard remarked, his eyes instantly assessing me. So, Theon had called a healer. Bring her to her quarters, Master Theon, he ordered, politely leading the way to my room. I glared at Theon, warning him not to touch me. I turned to follow healer Ulrich when I was suddenly lifted by my thighs and tossed over his shoulder. Ouch! I gasped, feeling the pressure on my stomach only tugging at my injury on my side. See careful, Master Theon. She's injured, is she not? Healer Ulrich exclaimed. Healer Ulrich was a healer mage and one of the heads at the Royal Infirmary. She isn't in that much pain, are you? Theon asked, yanking me off his shoulder and into his arms. I gasped in pain, clinging onto his shoulder and glaring at him murderously. I didn't say that. I said I can manage. You are hurting me. I hissed, trying not to focus on his perfect jawline. Don't like a little pain? He taunted quietly. My heart skipped a beat, and he quirked an eyebrow. Key, little storm. I blinked, realizing we were outside my quarters. I quickly took it out and handed it to the healer. I glanced down at Theon's neck. My nails had drawn blood. Well, he was being a jerk to me too. Our eyes met, and aside from his anger, I couldn't make out the emotions in them. Lay her on the sofa, or more like drop me, I remarked as he walked over to the sofa. Please don't, Master, Ulrich said nervously. Theon clenched his jaw as he let my legs down instead, before he pushed me with a mocking flick back onto the couch. Good enough, he remarked, glaring at Ulrich. He didn't wait for an answer, walking out and shutting the door behind us with a snap. Sorry about that. I apologized. Healer Ulrich was a respected elder, but it seemed Theon had no care for it. He smiled warmly at me and began to open his bag. Don't worry. I deal with brutish men all day long. He just has thick skin. He does care. He was very clear I must come immediately. Now tell me, dear, where are you hurt? I lifted my shirt, his words ringing in my head. Theon was a mystery. I didn't get if he cared or not. Sometimes he did things that I am sure my own delusional mind made me think he cared. But then I knew that was not true. I zoned out as the healer got to work, a soft orange light around his hands. As I pondered on everything, was it possible to crush on someone who my mother would say is a total bad boy, one I should stay away from? However, no matter what a jerk he is, I couldn't get over the way my heart raced in his presence, the way those amber eyes lit my entire body ablaze with a dangerous desire. The fact that he was the only one who made me forget the emptiness that I felt inside. I am surprised the poison didn't spread as deeply as I assumed it would. A siren's touch is nothing more than death itself, he mused, sitting back and taking out a roll of gauze. I frowned, remembering the siren's kiss of death, and shuddered. There were rumors that when one is kissed by a siren, their death is inevitable. It had been strange. They say when a siren sings, one becomes completely enraptured and is lured to their death without even realizing what fate they faced. Was that a blessing or a curse? Rest, Miss Delacour. The healing herbs will make you feel rather drowsy. I'll show myself out. I didn't reply, letting sleep envelope me in its embrace. Jian, 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 Jian. I don't know, Lena. Maybe you imagined the kiss. It was the following night. Charlene and I were in her quarters. We were discussing what happened yesterday. Luckily, the king didn't question us. But it seemed Theon had had a word with him, and Charlene had told her father how she was fine. I couldn't imagine being kissed by that thing. I rolled my eyes, lifting my top as I looked at my healing wounds in her ornate gold-framed, floor-length mirror. She gave me a sheepish look. Her gorgeous ginger hair seemed to glow in the warm lights of her bedroom. I know, but it is. You know they say it's bad luck. She mumbled, looking down at her organza gown, fiddling with the hem. Yeah, no one lives after the kiss of death, and if by some miracle you make it back alive, you will die soon. I've heard that old tale. I don't believe in it. We all know that they kill by ripping our hearts out, not by the kiss. But if you speak of it, people will associate you with bad luck. I would never think that, but just be careful. I looked at her reflection in the mirror, our eyes meeting. I knew what she was saying, that it would just make me and Whole look worse. I nodded. I get it. Theon probably saw it. But he won't tell anyone. I know that much. Aside from the Alpha, if he hasn't already told him. I doubt it. Father didn't say. She shook her head confidently. He just said Theon once again proved himself. Well, he did save us. I pouted. Saved me again. Did you hear what he said before we were dragged into the water? I asked, turning away from the mirror and letting my top fall over my stomach. He called your name. He saved you first. She wiggled her eyebrows pointedly, and I tilted my head, rolling my eyes. Oh, for goddess's sake, Charles. Stop it. He probably did that as the siren had a hold on me. It was probably easier to save me first, or he just thought I was useless, and probably would die before you. I dropped onto her luxurious four-poster bed and stared up at the canopy. The organza curtains blew gently thanks to the wind that came in through the open balcony doors. I don't know. I just think maybe I need to stop gushing over him. Charlene murmured, watching me. I turned my head to look at her, as she slowly lay back on the bed next to me, placing her hands under her cheek. I'm serious, Yelena. I think maybe he's into you. I stared into her eyes and smiled sadly. I'm a nobody, Charlene. Besides, this full moon he cannot avoid you. I stated. The last 2 full moons Theon hadn't been around. We can only find our mates once both have shifted and are in the vicinity under a full moon. Plus, this full moon was also the day of the festival of the moon goddess. They say couples who find each other under the moon goddess festival's full moon will hold great blessings through life. I highly doubt it, she said. Rolling onto her back, she stared at the ceiling. I have training tomorrow. You don't need to come. I'll be okay. I need to do this. As future Alpha Queen, you know, Yelena. She sat up, staring at her lap. Her organza gown was open, and she was drawing invisible patterns on the silk of her pajama buttons with a finger. I asked. She turned to me, and I was surprised to see the tears in them. When I become Alpha Queen, I am going to make you my beta. I don't care what happens now, or who Dad chooses. You will be my beta. It's your birthright. And not only that, but you are the one person I trust the most. I was unable to hold back my tears as I sat up, about to get up from the bed to hide my tears when she wrapped her arms around my shoulders. "You are strong and perfect. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise." I nodded, a few tears trickling down my cheeks. I couldn't tell her. But it wasn't that easy. As future queen, her job was to do what was best for her kingdom. One day she'll probably think the same as her father, and when she did, I wouldn't hold it against her. The sound of crickets, chirping, and the distant hooting of owls filled the night sky. Silence had blanketed the castle, only then did I take my leave. The festival was the day after tomorrow, and I still hadn't gone shopping for any clothes. I had even tried to fit into something of Mom's, but it was futile. We were far too different in body shapes. I strolled through the silent halls of the castle. Charlene had been falling asleep when I left, but I felt far too fresh to even consider sleeping. I decided to go for a stroll around the grounds. Perhaps that would tire me out. I stepped out of the castle, the guards at the door giving me a nod, which I returned with one of my own and began walking swiftly. A good jog may help. I picked up my pace and soon I was jogging along, the wind rushing past my face, the adrenaline in my body fueling me as I sped up until I was running as fast as I could, jumping and skipping over the steps or over the low walls. I couldn't stop the smile that crossed my lips. For a fleeting moment I felt free, simply enjoying myself without thinking of anything else. I turned the corner and found myself in one of the far training grounds, freezing in my tracks when I saw none other than Theon. My heart pounded, and it was not because I hadn't seen him since he left angrily yesterday, but because he was shirtless as he slicked back his damp locks, his arm flexing as he did so. His pants stuck to that sexy ass, tattoos of engravings ran down his spine, and there were some symbols on his lower back. He turned, his amber eyes flashing gold when they met mine. Anger. I stepped back, raising my fist to my breasts. "What did I do now? I didn't know you were here," I said defensively. I couldn't stop myself from letting my gaze trail down his tattooed torso and felt my pussy clench as I swallowed hard. 3 chains hung around his neck, his chest heaving as he breathed hard. A trickle of sweat ran down his torso and between his defined abs. The urge to lick it up was overpowering. His Adonis belt was perfection. Dipping into those pants, and I snapped my gaze back up to him, my cheeks burning. He saw me, staring. "Goddess." He walked towards me slowly, and I stepped back, my gaze dipping to the bandages he was now unwrapping from his hands slowly. "So, once again, you're out alone, when you know exactly how weak you are." His words hurt, and I knew his next words would be equally harsh. "Tell me, little storm, are you that desperate to be defiled?" A flash of anger rushed through me, and I glared at him. "Don't assume. I was out for a run," I snapped icily. He tilted his head, unwrapping the other hand as he leaned down close to my ears. His scent mixed with sweat, making me giddy. My heart thudding at his closeness, my core clenching in anticipation and confusion. "Then tell me this," his husky deep voice whispered in my ear. "Why do you smell so fucking aroused?" "Yelena," I gasped, my cheeks flushing. "I am not." But before I could push him away, his thumb flicked one of my hardened nipples, sending a sharp sizzle of pleasure to my core. "Your mouth can lie, but your body cannot." He smirked slightly, now looking into my eyes. "Tell me, Yelena, do you taunt me on purpose just so I pay attention to you? Don't get so full of yourself. If I wanted you, I'd say so." I lied, turning my back on him. Was I that obvious? My heart and stomach were a mess of nerves. I heard a small breathy chuckle leave his lips, his arms snaking around me, placing his hand firmly on my lower stomach as he pulled me back against him. Making a small whimpering gasp escape me, I could feel his entire body against me, feel the bulge in his pants press against my lower back, only adding to the ache in my core. the way his chest felt, rising and falling behind me. Then tread carefully, because in the end, don't forget I am a beast, worse than any other. I closed my eyes, unable to reply. His hand ran up my stomach slowly, making me suck it in, my breasts rising and falling heavily. Suddenly, he pulled up my top, exposing my injured hip. The cool air against the sore skin made me snap out of my daze just as he stepped away from me. You are lucky to have survived. His voice was emotionless once more as he dropped my top and turned away. I felt as if anger was radiating off him. A tiny part of me wondered if there was any truth in Charlene's words. Could I deny that I'd love it if someone did care for me like that? I couldn't deny the attraction I felt towards him, but did he feel the same? No one came to check up on me after the injury. None of the Gamma females or even the Luna. It seemed since Mom and Dad were gone. I was just no one. Just another forgotten orphan. How were you not affected by the siren's song? I asked, trying to change the subject. Who isn't? I just knew how to keep my sanity. He tilted his head, and I tried not to pay attention to how sexy he looked, that sheen of sweat driving me crazy. How? I asked, my gaze dipping to his lips when he licked them. What? Planning to jump into the ocean again? He gripped my chin, rubbing his thumb along my lips, sending my heart racing even faster. She kissed you. I tensed, my heart thudding as I tugged away. Did you tell the Alpha that you are more of an ill omen now than you already were? His words cut, and I forced a small smile onto my face. Yeah, I guess. So did you tell him? Number. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thanks. Don't mistake it for compassion. I just found it unnecessary. I don't believe in superstitions. I nodded, of course. I would be a fool to think it was anything else. Good night, Theon. I didn't wait for a reply, jogging back the way I came. I think that was enough for tonight. I felt his piercing gaze burn into me until I disappeared around the corner, letting out a deep breath I didn't know I had been holding. Theon. The man was a mystery that 2 years on, I had not even managed to make a dent into learning about. Who was Theon? What life did he have before he lost his memory? Charlene and I had observed and noted down his tattoos over time, but they were just strong proverbs or messages. Nothing to link him to where he may be from. They just gave the impression he was someone with a strong will, powerful and believed in striving for what he wanted. I could have told anyone that without reading his tattoos. Theon. One day I am going to learn more about you. I promise. Jian. The following day I had done as Charlene had said and didn't attend training with her. Instead, I decided I'd do my own light training. Although I was almost healed, I was advised to take it easy. Then I needed to find something to wear, and so I spent the entire afternoon in the bustling markets, as everyone seemed to be doing last-minute shopping. The cobbled streets were full of life. Men, women, and children alike chatted, bartered, played, and simply were enjoying this occasion. I smiled remembering coming down here with Mom and Dad 2 years ago. It was one of the rare times Dad would accompany us, as Beta he didn't have as much time. But that year he did, smiling at the memory. I stopped at a stall selling pretty dresses, ones with the customary floral embroidery that the Kingdom of Astalion was known for. Despite the stunning designs, her stall was far emptier than most. Can I help you, my sweet? The middle-aged woman asked from behind the counter. I looked at her smiling. She was part fae, part human or mage. I wasn't sure, but it made sense as to why people weren't bothering to buy from her. A shame. Even though we were at peace, the discrimination remained. Just how it would be like this for werewolves residing in a fae kingdom. I need a dress for tomorrow's festival, and your dresses are stunning, but all looked a little too small on the bodices, well those on display anyway. Would you have anything that may fit me? I gestured at my tan halter necktop and flared black pants. She smiled and tilted her head. Her dark hair had a few stray whites shining under the afternoon sun. Do I? Well, I have this yellow fabric I bought down in the town of Kanesh. She pointed at a stunning yellow gown. I have this embroidery all the way from Eastmoor. She carried on pointing at several dresses. I can adjust them to fit your bosom, I assure you. Now tell me, my sweet, have any caught your attention? Daku. I chewed on my bottom lip. Mom always did this. I didn't even know how to shop. They are all so beautiful. You should go over to the stalls over there, dear. I turned as someone tapped my shoulder. Her haughty nose turned up as she looked at the woman behind the stall. No thanks. I like these dresses. I replied firmly to the elder she-wolf. Her eyebrows shot up before she stepped away. As you wish. A bad seed, she muttered, walking off. I smiled apologetically at the woman. Ignore them, I said without thinking, instantly worrying if I offended her. Her eyes crinkled as she shook her head, the wrinkle lines around her eyes giving away that she was far older than she looked. I am used to it. I have not sold one dress, despite setting up shop every day for the last 2 weeks. She chortled, moving aside some of the boxes that contained folded dresses. Well, today you will, because I need a dress. I touched the yellow, tilting my head. It was pretty, but I'd stand out. I turned my attention to the ivory and maroon. It was also nice. I think I have a dress that doesn't even need adjusting, the woman exclaimed suddenly, her dark eyes sparkling as she turned away and bent down to get something from under her desk. It's been collecting dust for the last few years, but it is a timeless piece, and I think it may be just what you are looking for. My curiosity piqued. I think I did need someone to just choose for me. I was so indecisive. She took out a plain box that had probably once been white, yet it had taken on a yellowish hue over time. Unlike the rest of the pretty boxes that her stall held, which were tied with ribbons, this one was plain. The fabric isn't the latest. It's something I picked up on a visit home. Open it. My heart skipped a beat as I looked at the box, from a fey kingdom maybe. I lifted the lid from the box, staring inside at the folded dress. A smile crossed my lips and I didn't need to ask her to take it out. This was it. The perfect dress. I knew it was going to fit me, just as she had said. Oh, thank you, Madam Alima. She smiled. Thank you, Madam Alima. I love it. May I know the price? It is perfect, I complimented, running my hand over the fabric before lifting the short dress from its box. She chuckled. You have already paid for it. I frowned. No, I haven't. You have. With kindness, child. No. Kindness isn't something to use as payment. I have money. You don't argue with an old woman, my sweet. My word is final. However, I have some accessories and shoes to match, and you can pay for those. I need to make an earning too. I couldn't help but smile, nodding in defeat. Then, you better show me your finest heels. Shopping for tomorrow. It isn't like girls to leave it until the last day. I turned, recognizing the voice of none other than Raiden Bolton, one of the future Gammas and also the older brother to Ress. The boy I had protected that fateful night. As you may have heard, I am not really the ordinary ideal girl. Now, am I? He smirked, his curly black locks tumbling in front of his eyes. Of course not ordinary. Yelena Delacour is one of a kind and absolutely ideal. I rolled my eyes. It's far too early to flirt, Raiden. I'm sure Kalia wouldn't be happy. I replied, picking up a pair of pretty heels. Kalia! He looked confused for a moment before smirking. She was 3 women ago, my little flower. The only name I cannot forget is yours. Go away, Raiden. He chuckled and glanced at Alima, who was watching him firmly. I'll see you tomorrow. By the way, that dress is gorgeous. I gave him a glare, but he simply winked one of those bright blue eyes of his before he walked off. "Well, he is charming," Alima replied with a knowing smile. "He's a player." Raiden was a year older than me, and he always flirted with me. But it was just that, playful flirting. But somehow, I was beginning to look forward to tomorrow. Maybe what I needed was some fun and merriment. That is what tomorrow promised. Food, dancing, games, and happiness. And I planned to look as good as I wanted to feel. "These ones," I said, picking up a pair of heels. "Yelena." The night of the Moon Goddess's festival arrived, and like every year, the skies were clear, the full moon gracing us with its presence, and the sheer ambience of the night was warm and welcoming. The merry music drifted in through the open windows, making you want to get up and join. I was getting ready with Charlene. She had been adamant that I spend the afternoon getting ready with her, although this was usually a time one spent with their families, and every year before this one, she and her mother got ready together just as I did with mine. "Those curlers look ready to be removed," Charlene said to the human woman who was helping us. "Yes, princess," Belinda replied, bowing her head before she came over to me and began to remove the curlers from my hair. I stared in the mirror at my face. My makeup was done, having been told my skin was perfect without a base. She said she'd do subtle touch-ups, but I looked entirely different. I looked older, more mature. My cheeks were accentuated, a shimmer dusting my cheekbones with a vibrant deep pink lipstick coating my lips. My eyelashes were layered with mascara, making my long lashes stand out even more with a touch of shimmer on my lids. When she began to open my hair, letting my now curly hair frame my face, Mom came to mind and her promise to curl my hair on my birthday. I felt a little emotional. But before I could delve into those thoughts, the door to Charlene's room opened, and her mother, Luna Soleil, stepped inside. She was an inch taller than Charlene, with features that were very similar to her daughter's. Her red hair was braided and twisted into an updo, woven with sprigs of fresh flowers, wearing a gorgeous pale blue dress with colored embroidery along the entire skirt. It fell to the ground, spreading around her stunningly. I stood up and lowered my head to the Luna. "I thought I'd come to check how you girls were getting on." "You look breathtaking, Charlene," Luna Soleil complimented, looking over at Charlene, who was wearing an off-shoulder ivory dress with a green leafy pattern along the sleeves and bodice. It reached just below her knees, and she had accessorized it with a deep green that only enhanced the green in her eyes. "We are almost done. I'm ready," Charlene replied, smiling over at me. "Perfect. We need to leave," Luna Soleil reminded her. The royal family would walk down the main street before taking their place in one of the marquees. The Luna wasn't often seen out. Being the true mate of the Alpha, if she was killed, it would kill the Alpha too, and so she was always kept inside. Even for this festival, she would spend the majority of the time inside and under heavy security, away from the public. Even Charlene would not be able to enjoy the festival as I would. "You look lovely as well, Yelena," Luna Soleil remarked, looking me over. I didn't miss the way her eyebrows shot up as she looked at the dress that I was wearing. "Interesting choice now. Come along, Charlene." I smiled politely, although I don't think it was exactly a compliment. "Was it the fabric?" "Ah, I got to go. I will see you for the banquet," Charlene whispered, giving me a tight hug. She smiled, her red-colored lips only complementing her snowy skin. I nodded. "See you later." I watched her until she disappeared from the room before I looked back in the mirror. The lace dress I was wearing was fitted to the waist, with thin straps and a bow on each shoulder. The skirt was 4 layers of tulle with a matching belt tied around my waist. The fabric had tiny sparkling stones sewn to it, giving the dress a stunning sparkle every time I moved. Belinda finished doing a braid along the crown of my head, adding a few sprigs of flowers and leaving the rest open. I reached up, tugging a few strands out and letting them frame my face. "Thank you, Belinda." I bent down and pulled my matching heels on, tying the ribbon that went around my ankle in a bow before I put in the drop earrings that I had selected from Mom's collection. I stood up and smiled at my reflection, trying to imagine what Mom and Dad would say to me. Dad would compliment me and joke that he needed to hide me away from all the lads. Mom would get emotional and say I've grown so much. The first round of fireworks that signaled the Alpha and his family had stepped out made me turn. "Have fun tonight." I called out to Belinda, knowing that once her chores were completed, she'd be able to enjoy the festival if she wanted. Humans would join in too. Although they didn't worship the same deity as us, the festival was still a place of fun for all. The food alone was enough to get anyone to step out of the confines of their homes. "Thank you, miss," she called as I left the room, clutching onto my little pouch that hung from my wrist. I was going to make sure I won some toys so I could donate them to the kids at the city orphanage. I rushed from the castle, my excitement growing with every step. "Jian, Jian, 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 Jian. I win!" I jumped up, punching the air as the man behind the counter chuckled. "Finally. But well done now, which one would you like?" "Finally. I used 7 gold coins there. It is not easy to hit 3 targets when they are moving." I pouted. "Oh, that white bunny. Yes, yes. But can't have it too easy now, can I, lass?" "I guess not." I smiled, taking the bunny teddy and walking along the bustling streets. Couples, families, and groups made their way around the vendors, or simply enjoyed the treats they held in their hands. Laughing and joking, some newly mated couples were obvious to point out, staring with starry eyes into their mate's eyes. That or making out with one another, like they only existed in each other's worlds. Mates. It wasn't very often that we actually found our fated mates. They say 1 in 5 people will find their true mates. It's rare considering they could be anywhere in the world. Since I had stepped out, I had received a lot of attention. And a lot of it was from young men. I stopped outside a food stall, the smell of the fried steak fries filling my nose, and I waited patiently for my turn to purchase them. I tried to ignore the 2 young girls in front of me who were staring at me very openly. "Hey!" I waved, hoping they realized they were staring. "You look like a princess." One of them exclaimed. "Yes, you only need a tiara," the second added. Both looked cute themselves. They were no older than 10 and were dressed in stunning organza dresses with floral embroidery on them. "Well, I believe that we don't need a crown to be a princess," I replied with a smile, just like the 2 princesses before me. They giggled, turning away when it was their turn to order, just as 2 adults came hurrying over. "Thanks, Auntie," one of the girls said, smiling at the woman who had paid for them. I turned my gaze to the sky above, glancing at the full glowing moon, enjoying the soft wind whispering past me. "They say when we die, we go to the realm of the moon goddess." Were Mom and Dad there now? "Next, 1 cone of fries, please." I spoke, stepping forward and taking out the money to pay for it. "My, you look stunning," the woman behind the counter complimented me as she tossed salt and pepper over the square of paper containing my fries before giving them a good shake and holding it out to me. "Thank you." "Next," she called, giving me a nod as I moved away, and a group of 5 stepped forward. I picked up the little wooden fork and began eating, balancing my bunny under my arm. The sound of upbeat folk music reached my ears, and I followed it until I saw a large crowd of young adults, clearly seeming to have some sort of dancing show going on. A large group had gathered around to watch the 12 young women in the middle dance to the current song, all dressed in vibrant colors. The crowd sang along, clapping and cheering them on. I munched on my chips, pushing my way through the crowd until I got to the front. "Oi, stop pushing," a woman growled. "I am short." I protested apologetically. Well, short in werewolf standard anyway. I moved my hips to the music, eating my chips, enjoying the show. I had just about finished my chips when one of the stunning women dancing grabbed my wrist. Join us? I blinked as the crowd cheered. I looked around, scanning the crowd, wondering if there were any of the high-ranking wolves here. Seeing none, I tossed my bunny to the ground behind us and started watching the other women's footwork. I placed my hands on my hips, copying them as we danced to the music. I swayed my body sensually as I twirled, hoping my dress didn't ride up. Go, Yelena. My eyes widened as I spun around, scanning the crowd, when a head full of black hair caught my attention. Raiden stood there, looking handsome in a navy shirt, tucked into a pair of black pants and a belt around his waist. Arms folded as he watched me, giving me a wink. Confidently, he strode towards us and fell in step by my side as he began dancing alongside us. The crowd only seemed to get more excited. Seriously, Raiden? Only way to get a dance with you, he replied, smirking, as he took my hand and spun me out. His eyes dipped to my breasts as his hand went to my waist, his eyes flashing before locking with mine. You've always been the most beautiful girl in a stallion, but tonight, I don't think there's even one woman on this planet who can match up to your beauty. How poetic. I smiled, raising my eyebrow. But thank you. It's a pretty dress, isn't it? He spun me around, his hands on my hips as he danced behind me. Not as pretty as the girl in it. Don't make me your next pursuit, Raiden. It won't work. I am not interested, I said lightly, pulling away and dancing by his side once more. You can never be just another one of my escapades, Yelena. I genuinely... He trailed off, spinning me back into his arms and pressing me against his firm chest. I could feel his entire body against mine, blushing in embarrassment as I tried to pull away. Don't look now, but I think many are jealous of me right now, he chuckled. I was confused, wondering what he had been about to say when I felt a chill run down my spine as the song came to an end. Through the cheers and clapping, I looked in the direction Raiden was now staring, my heart thundering when I saw Theon standing there, his arms crossed, his eyes shimmering a dazzling gold, the hostility in them clear as he glared at Raiden. Yelena. Maybe I was wrong, Raiden murmured, confusing me. I pulled him to the side as the next song began, and more people began to join in with the dancing. Hi, Theon, I said as I collected my bunny from the ground, dusting it off. His eyes snapped to me, and I saw the tick in his jaw as he clenched his teeth. Yelena. My stomach fluttered, as it always did when he called my name. He looked handsome, in full black, his sleeves pushed up and his pants hugging his thighs. A white belt with a silver chain on it was around his hips, only emphasizing his incredible body. It's a pleasure to see you, Theon, Raiden offered, smiling respectfully. No one needed to announce it for me to know that everyone already saw him as their soon-to-be beta. Wish I could say the same. Theon's cold reply came. I looked between the two men. The humor that had danced in Raiden's eyes moments earlier was gone, replaced by curiosity and a hint of something else. Well, enjoy the evening, Yelena. It was an honor to dance with you tonight. He gave me a charming smile and took my hand. He raised it to his lips, kissing it softly. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I replied, trying not to let Theon's glare affect me. Charlene's words came back to me. If there was any truth in what she said, then my heart skipped a beat, and I was unable to stop myself from reaching up and pecking Raiden on the cheek. Thank you as well, for being such a pleasure to dance with. My heart was going crazy, and I dared not look at Theon. My eyes were fixed on Raiden's blue ones. A smile crossed his face, and he nodded. Anytime, beautiful. He gave Theon a final nod before walking off, and I dared to gather my courage to look at the amber-eyed man next to me. Hey, Wait, didn't we already greet one another? I fiddled with the strands of hair that framed my face, almost dropping my rabbit. The silence was deafening. Didn't I warn you to stay away from men like him? I looked at him, surprised. I don't need to stay away from anyone if I don't want to. Besides, he's nice, I stated, trying not to pay attention to the way I was feeling. Was it just me, or was he acting like a jealous, possessive male? Maybe I was delusional, and it was just my wishful thinking that was confusing me. He grabbed me by the wrist, making me gasp at the power in his grip as he turned and dragged me along with him away from the glittering lanterns and music. Theon, you're hurting me. He didn't reply, pulling me around a corner roughly and down a dimly lit alleyway. Theon, stop it. What is your problem? I snapped. He turned, his eyes shimmering with irritation as he grabbed my arms and slammed me against the stone wall behind me, making me gasp at the brutal force that he had used. One of his hands was still wrapped around my wrist, pinning it to the wall next to my head. He didn't reply, simply glaring at me as if he wanted to burn holes through my head. His heart was beating a little faster than usual, and my gaze dipped to his lips. My problem is that your stupidity knows no bounds. Or is it that maybe you want me? I whispered softly. I am not stupid, Theon. Otherwise, care to explain why seeing me talking to Raiden really pissed you off? I am not Charlene. You're not my bodyguard. What I do is none of your concern. You need not get pissed off. Call me crazy. But I couldn't just let him get away without explaining himself. Was that your aim? To piss me off? His husky voice was making me breathless. I tried to focus on anything but how close he was now standing. How could someone irritate you yet at the same time make you want them so badly? Not exactly. His scent invaded my senses, and my core clenched when he stepped even closer. My breasts that were already sticking out thanks to him keeping my arms captive against the wall now pressed against his chest. Then, was the aim to make me jealous? My eyes flew open at his words, gasping when he released one of my wrists, and instead wrapped it around my neck. Did it work? I braved, my heart thumping, watching him as his gaze dipped to my cleavage before slowly running back up to my lips. Say something. I could smell my arousal, which meant he sure as hell could. We were too close. I could feel his body barely centimeters away from mine. The bulge in his pants pressing against my lower stomach only made my core throb. The urge to reach down was overwhelming, but instead I wrapped my hand around his wrist as he held my neck. I warned you that I am a beast, and I will destroy you. You're playing a game far bigger than you could ever imagine. Keep tempting me and I'll ravish you in a way that you never could even imagine in your wildest dreams. I slowly ran my hand down his forearm, trying to comprehend what was happening. He wanted me, even if it was just a desire he wanted to satiate. A pang of hurt clawed at my chest, and reality hit me hard. Number, he was right. He'll destroy me, but I still needed something. I wanted him. I wanted to feel what he could offer, even if it was just once, before he realized that he made a mistake. Then show me. Show me exactly what you can offer, I whispered, running my hand down his waist, feeling his hard, muscular body through his shirt. The slight racing of his heart made my own speed up. Our eyes locked as his hand tightened around my neck. We knew this was reckless. I could see the battle within his gorgeous amber eyes as he fought himself. Which side would win? Logic or lust? His thumb caressed my neck, making me sigh. I am glad you aren't wearing a necklace, because the only thing that looks good wrapped around your neck is my hand. Goddess. His words sent another sizzle of pleasure through me. How could he make me so crazy with just his words? I ran my tongue along my upper lip sensually. A wanton moan escaped them when I felt him throb against my lower stomach, and a low growl escaped his lips. "Fuck Theon," I whimpered the moment he crushed his body against mine completely, closing the tiny gap that had separated us moments earlier. He leant down, his lips near my ear, the warmth of his breath making me giddy with anticipation when he tensed, freezing. His heart thudded, and I knew reality must have settled in. Don't pull away. I couldn't let him. I didn't want to be alone tonight. In a futile attempt, I ran my hand over his package, my pussy clenching at just the light feel I had managed of his large shaft. I heard him suck in a sharp breath as he moved his head back, looking down into my eyes. "The king has summoned us. We need to get to the banquet now." He let go of me, turning away, his voice once again cold and emotionless before he walked off, not even waiting for a reply. The absence of the warmth of his body made me feel strangely cold. He had left me alone in this dark alley, feeling empty. Jian jian, jian 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 jian. I headed for the banquet field, wondering why the king had summoned us and feeling confused. It was clear that there was something from Theon's side. I wanted him, he wanted me, but all we did was clash. I wasn't a fool. I knew Theon didn't seem like the type to want anything more. But I couldn't deny how I felt in his presence. I looked around the tables, unsure where to sit. Once upon a time, I sat at the alpha table with my family. I saw Charlene watching me and gave her a small smile and forced a smile. "Sit down, dear." Raiden's mother, Andrea, said to me. She was probably one of the only ones who weren't entirely hostile to me, for saving their son, I guess. Although even then, they kept it neutral. I sat down at one of the long tables, covered in white cloth, with flowers and wine set in between the luxurious platters of food. I looked around slowly, scanning the area until I spotted the king was talking to Raiden's father, Gamma Henry, as well as Gamma Grayson. "Do you know what's happening?" I asked. Andrea smiled sympathetically. "Oh, nothing at all. She was lying." I nodded, not saying anything else, as Rhys flashed me a smile. "You look beautiful," he commented, blushing lightly. I said the very same thing. Raiden's drawling voice came as he pulled the seat next to me out and sat down. After what happened with Theon, I didn't want Theon to see me sitting next to Raiden, but there was nothing I could do or come up with. That would be a good enough excuse for me to leave the table. I forced a smile, and he frowned slightly, looking concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, as the king walked to the Alpha's table that stood on a dais, a table where his two Gammas and usually the Beta family would sit. I nodded in response to Raiden, reaching over and helping myself to part of the lamb joint. A pleasant hum of chatter filled the room as everyone began to eat. I picked up my knife when Raiden's hand closed around my forearm. "What is this?" His voice was sharp, yet full of concern, and I looked down to see the clear handprint Theon had left on my wrist. My heart thundered, and I wondered if there was a mark left on my neck as well. I didn't dare look up at him, hoping my hair covered it, if there was any. I pulled out of his hold, slipping my hand under the table. Andrea was watching us curiously. "It's nothing. Can I have everyone's attention?" Alpha Andres' voice boomed around us, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me, turning to look at our Alpha. "Tonight, we pray to our goddess and celebrate everything she has blessed us with, power, prosperity, and peace." Everyone had fallen silent, listening to the king. Peace. Did everyone forget that there must be more to the attack that happened 2 months ago? However, 2 months ago, I lost a dear friend, William Delacour, a loyal companion, a brave warrior, a strong beta, along with his mate Hana, in that attack, and a loving father. Did you forget that one Alpha Andres? It hurt the way he talked about my dad, as if he was nothing to me. Why didn't he pre-warn me that he was going to mention Dad tonight? I saw Charlene try to stand up, but her mother pulled her down. She glanced at me, and I forced a smile. With a heavy heart, I have finalized on a new beta, someone strong, smart, and efficient. Alpha Andres continued. A murmur rippled through the crowd of seated people, and I knew that through the open mind link, those who weren't close enough to hear would receive the news. I felt a few heads turn toward me, but I kept my gaze ahead. A new beta. She doesn't even have a wolf. Someone else? I hear it's the young warrior, Theon. I present to you your new beta, Beta Theon, a man who has proven himself worthy countless times. Someone I can trust, and someone I know can hold this kingdom together by my daughter's side. My heart squeezed as Theon, who stood to the side, remained passive. Despite the cheering, he didn't go on to the dais. Our eyes met, but from this distance, I couldn't make out what he was thinking. It hurt so much. Everyone began cheering with approval, but it all became a haze, the remarks and clapping becoming a loud, painful echo in my mind. Will you not acknowledge the daughter of the beta you so loved? At least you could have let me know that today I was to be stripped of my future. Yes, I knew it was coming, but still, Lena? Yelena. Someone was calling me, but I couldn't understand who it was. My eyes were fixed on the Alpha. Maybe, just maybe, he'll still say something. Come sit in your spot, Beta Theon. We will hold the ceremony this coming week. I stood up, unable to sit here any longer. Yelena? Raiden whispered, trying not to cause a scene as he took hold of my hand gently. I tugged free, doing my best to walk out of here with my head held high. Give me strength. Goddess, Mom, Dad, you're still watching over me, right? My vision blurred with unshed tears as I kept going, ignoring everyone around me. The moment I was out of sight, I broke into a run, only for Raiden to call me once again, the sound of his footsteps as he jogged to catch up to me. Yelena, wait. Leave me alone. What do you want? I asked, quickly blinking away the tears as I stopped running, not wanting to cause a scene. The marks on your wrist. He walked over to me swiftly, taking hold of my hand. It's nothing, Raiden. Please just go away. He was concerned about the bruises, but didn't he realize it was the pain inside of me that was destroying me? I am sorry. He trailed off, his gaze falling to my neck and his concern vanished. His eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, cupping my cheeks tenderly. Did Theon hurt you, Yelena? No, he didn't. Raiden, please. I saw someone approaching from the corner of my eyes and stopped mid-sentence, turning my gaze to see Theon. His face was emotionless, his eyes hard as he looked at us both. It hurt to see him after knowing he was the one to take my birthright, but at the same time, a part of me needed him, needed something from him, his touch, or just something. Theon. He turned without another word, walking away, anger rolling off him in waves. Please don't turn your back on me, but he didn't look back, not even once.